discover the amazing story of an Apache who gave his farms for a son but fell for the widow. Mateo stood on the edge of his wheat field, shadows creeping along the ground as the sun dipped low. The golden grains had fed his family for generations, but the weight of impending loss crushed him. His son Thomas lay in a hospital bed struggling for breath, while Mateo faced the bitter reality of selling the family farms to pay mounting medical bills. Each acre felt like a piece of his soul, the land a testament to his heritage. The whispers of past family voices lingered in the breeze, reminding him of laughter, love, and the promises he made to honor their legacy. How could he give up what his ancestors had worked so hard to build? As the sky darkened, Mateo's thoughts twisted. Regret gnawed at him like a relentless predator. He and Thomas had journeyed through tumultuous years, marred by distance and unspoken words. The rift between them felt unbridgeable, their relationship shackled by resentment and neglect. He'd sacrificed so much, yet all that remained was a hollow ache where fatherly pride should have thrived. Selling the land would mean severing the last ties to their Apache roots. But how could he continue holding on when his son's life hung in the balance? The sharp pang of guilt flooded him with sorrow, painting every thought in gray. Mateo's world shifted when he met Emily, a nurse whose compassion reached beyond mere professionalism. She spoke tenderly of Thomas's courage when lights dimmed, a beacon of warmth in his dark isolation. They shared their stories, both carrying scars of loss and yearning for connection. As laughter escaped their lips, even if fleetingly, a forgotten ember flared within him. The heaviness surrounding Mateo ebbed momentarily, her presence a balm for his aching heart. Yet guilt loomed larger. How could he dare feel hope or longing when uncertainty enveloped his family? Before long, however, the clouds parted briefly, only to grow darker with Thomas's unexpected recovery. His reclaiming of life came with shockwaves of revelation, a desire to abandon the family legacy. "I want to sell the land, Dad. It's time for a fresh start," Thomas declared, innocence overshadowed by ambition. Mateo's insides twisted at the betrayal, grappling with the realization that his son sought a life beyond Apache customs. That ancestral pride he held tightly was crumbling, pushed aside for dreams drenched in modernity and loss of identity. "Breathe," he told himself. Yet, when faced with Thomas's relentless aspirations, anguish overshadowed all rational thought. Could a father watch his son erase everything he held sacred? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mateo was torn, stretched to his limits between obligations to family and the flickers of hope ignited by Emily. As he wrestled with the tension, a deep uncertainty enveloped him. A thunderous knock shattering the silence sent a tremor spiking through him. Who could it be? The forgotten members of family. Old feuds and secrets teetered on the brink of revelation. Anxiety clenched his throat. Would he defend every inch of family soil, or risk breaking free for a new chance at love and fulfillment? Standing at that door, drenched in stormy apprehension, he felt time freeze. The future felt less certain than ever, laden with conflicting loyalties and decisions that could unravel everything he thought he understood. Mateo hesitated at the door, his heart pounding like a distant drum, life and legacy caught in a precarious balance. With a deep breath, he finally opened it, bracing himself for an unexpected visitor. To his shock, it was Emily, her presence both comforting and unsettling. She stood there, framed by the fading light, eyes bright with an urgency that mirrored the storm in his mind. "Mateo, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the turbulence swirling around them. There was a gravity in her tone that he couldn't ignore, one that pulled him forward into her magnetic aura. For a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps she had the answers he desperately sought. He stepped aside, allowing her to enter. The air inside the house felt heavy, infused with the weight of unresolved issues and hidden pain. As Emily settled in, Mateo's mind raced. The impending fate of the land loomed larger than ever. His thoughts clashed. The urge to defend his heritage battled the desire for reconnection and understanding. "What's troubling you, Mateo?" she asked, her gaze piercing through the haze of his conflict. He paused, grappling with emotions that threatened to spill over. "Thomas wants to sell the land," he blurted out, a rush of resentment coloring his words. "He dreams of starting anew, breaking free from everything I've built." Emily listened intently, her brow creasing in thought. "Have you talked to him about why he feels that way? Maybe there's a reason behind his wish, a reason you could help him see." Mateo's throat tightened. "And what if he doesn't want to see? What if this new life means erasing our past, our culture? I can't allow that to happen." His voice trembled with a mixture of anger and sorrow, spilling his frustrations into the room like an open wound. Emily gently placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "It could be a chance for you both to grow, to redefine what your legacy means. Selling the land doesn't mean losing your identity. Have you thought about that?" The thought unsettled him. Could he really adapt to this new reality without surrendering what he held dear? "You don't understand. The land is everything," he countered, wrestling the new idea in his mind. While he sought to protect his roots, his heart whispered of fated possibilities for reconciliation. "Maybe it's about finding a balance, Mateo, allowing both of you to live fully without discarding the past entirely," she replied, her voice a calm against his internal storm. In that moment, kneeling at the crossroads of his fears and aspirations, Mateo felt a tremor of realization coursing through him. Emily's words thrummed against the walls that had long encased his heart. Perhaps the answer did not lie solely in the land, nor in the disobedience of tradition, but rather in seeking a middle ground, a chance to support his son while holding on to the essence of who they were. Drawing a deep breath, he turned to Emily, determination rising within him. "I need to talk to him, but I fear it might only push him away further." The truth lay heavy on his tongue. The thought of his son choosing a path devoid of Apache teachings felt like a haunting specter. Opening up that communication is key, but remember, it starts with listening, Emily urged gently, a reminder of the compassion that first drew him to her. Mateo nodded, internalizing her guidance. As uncertainty still whispered in the corners of his mind, he acknowledged an aching need for connection that remained unfulfilled. "Thank you, Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, sensing the complexity of both hope and apprehension that now danced between them. Standing there, he felt a shift within, a glimmer of possibility. Yet the looming confrontation with Thomas beckoned as a crucial turning point. Would he have the courage to face his son's desires and possibly treacherous paths of change? And as Mateo braced himself for the coming storm, he silently acknowledged that this journey, deeply entwined with love and legacy, had only just begun. Now it was time to step into the unknown, revealing the battle that awaited him within their fractured relationship. Would he summon the strength to not only defend his heritage but also embrace the evolution of their connection? Mateo stood in the dim light of his living room, the weight of his impending conversation with Thomas pressing heavily upon him. The clock ticking on the wall seemed to amplify his anxiety, each tick echoing the moments slipping away from him as he prepared to face his son. Doubts curdled in his stomach. Could he navigate this fragile terrain without erasing his own identity? He rehearsed lines in his mind, a mental script that kept shifting and splintering. How could he communicate the importance of their heritage, the stories ingrained in the land beneath their feet? In one breath, he felt the urgency of preservation. In another, he was aware of the shifting tides of his son's aspirations. Thomas, on the brink of adulthood, so eager to carve a new identity for himself amidst a world that tilted toward modernity. Despite his resolve, doubts swirled like the autumn leaves outside. Mateo decided he needed a change of environment before the impending confrontation. The outdoors offered solace, a connection to the earth that reminded him of his ancestors, The trees whispered age-old wisdom as he stepped through the door. As he walked, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows, each reminding him of the weight of his lineage. Birds flitted above, their flight a reminder of freedom. What does it mean to let go while holding on? He wondered as he approached an old sycamore tree, its branches sprawling like memory across time. It was beneath this tree that he had shared countless stories with Thomas, the legends of their people, the significance of place and identity that was woven into their bloodline. He sank onto a gnarled root, allowing the stillness of the evening to settle around him. A revelation dawned. It wasn't just about the land, but the story of resilience it encapsulated. Each inch of soil was imbued with their history, yet it wasn't solely about preservation. It was about evolving that legacy. Could he instill strength in Thomas while accepting that growth often mandated change? The notion stirred determination within him. What if I framed the conversation differently? He mused. Instead of a clash of wills, it could be a dialogue, an exchange about values, dreams, and fears that transcended the immediate contention of land ownership. The anxiety in his chest lessened as he contemplated how this approach could invite Thomas into the narrative as a partner rather than an adversary. Fueled by this new strategy, Mateo stood and turned back toward the house, the shadows no longer feeling oppressive, but rather holding promise. As he neared the door, he paused, suddenly aware of how deeply he needed to listen, to really hear his son's heart. The thought was both daunting and liberating. Gathering his breath, he stepped inside, ready to confront the complexities of their relationship and dive into the uncharted waters of understanding. It was no longer merely about losing the land, but uncovering insight into who Thomas was becoming. Before he could reach for the light switch, the door to the living room burst open. Thomas stood there, a picture of youthful defiance. The tension between them crackled like static in the air. Each faced the other, and every heartbeat echoed with anticipation. "Dad, can we talk?" Thomas's tone was serious, almost resolute, yet tinged with uncertainty. Mateo knew then that the moment had arrived. With the stakes higher than ever, Mateo felt the gravity of what lay ahead. Could they find a path together, or would this be a final stand that estranged them forever? The air hummed with the weight of their connection, the past, the present, and an uncertain future hinging on their words. As a wave of both fear and exhilaration washed over him, Mateo braced himself for the conversation that could either bridge or widen the chasm between them. The true battle was about to begin, and he wouldn't shy away from its intensity. Little did he know, the choices made this evening would not only carve their path forward, but also herald unexpected revelations that neither could foresee. Would his courage to listen withstand the winds of change? Mateo's heartbeat thudded in his ears, a rhythmic drum that announced the fervent urgency of the moment. He took a steadying breath, trying to harness the swirling amalgam of hopes and fears within. The living room stretched before him, cluttered with the vestiges of family memories, a place that had once felt sanctified now charged with a wary tension. He glanced at Thomas, who stood fiercely, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. This wasn't merely a conversation. It was a reckoning. "Dad?" Thomas began, his voice unexpectedly softening. "I've been thinking a lot about the land." Mateo focused intently on his son, a glimmer of hope igniting within. The young man's words hung heavy in the air, promising depth. "Your mother, she loved this place. It's why we stayed here, right?" Thomas continued, a hint of vulnerability cracking through the defiance. Mateo saw the specters of their lineage woven into his son's thoughts, a testament to the weight of expectation that Thomas bore. "Yes, it's our heritage," Mateo replied cautiously, measuring each word. "But it's also about what it means for you, what you want." Thomas dropped his gaze, the shadows in his eyes deepening. "I'm not sure if I want it," he admitted, trembling on the brink of revelation. "It feels like everyone expects me to hold on to this land, but I've dreams that don't fit here." That honesty pierced Mateo's heart, a mix of pain and pride thrumming in his chest. "What dreams?" he asked gently, leaning in, determined to foster the bridge he had envisioned. "I want to travel to explore," Thomas admitted. the walls tumbling down as he spoke more freely. I don't want to be tied down. I want to create my own story in a world that seems bigger than just this valley. Mateo's heart sank as he realized this wasn't just about property. It was about identity, courage, and a longing for autonomy that he understood all too well. It echoed the dreams of his youth, the allure of the unknown beckoning him away from the familiar. He contemplated the ghosts of his own choices, decisions that had chained him to a legacy he revered yet now saw through a lens of potential regret. Thomas, you shouldn't feel trapped by our past, Mateo murmured, his voice thick with emotion. But we can't dismiss it either. What if you could have both? Your path and our heritage. The silence settled heavily between them, laden with unspoken considerations. Thomas stared into his father's eyes, seeking not the rigid legacy Mateo had clung to, but a partnership that redefined their connection. Mateo recognized an opportunity here, an avenue for both of them to evolve. What if you took a year off? Mateo proposed, his mind whirling with possibilities. You could search for your own dreams, but also find a way to honor what was built here. Go with my blessing, explore, and come back to see how it feels. The light of possibility flickered in Thomas's eyes, hope mingling with skepticism. You wouldn't be angry? He asked, tentatively moving towards acceptance. Mateo shook his head, determination surfacing through the fog of fear. Anger won't lead to healing, son. It would only drive us apart. I need us to find our own places in this world together. We can't let desperation define our relationship. The emotional tension shifted, replaced by a foundational bond reforged in mutual understanding. For the first time, Mateo noticed the subtle nuances of resolve in Thomas's posture. They were in uncharted territories together, on the precipice of unity carved out of honesty. Can we write our own stories? Thomas asked, the vulnerability of his voice resonating with Mateo's own desires. Absolutely, Mateo said, his heart swelling with a sense of liberation and discovery. They both needed to embrace the risks, the feeling of venturing into the unknown while carrying their shared history lightly. As they lingered in that moment of connection, a sudden realization washed over Mateo. There would be trials ahead, not just in their relationship, but in the decisions they each had to make. Uncertainty loomed like a thick cloud over their future decisions, and the weight of inherited legacies would bind them to moments of conflict still to come. But something was different now. They had stepped into a new chapter together. Mateo could feel it. As their eyes locked, understanding and intention radiated between them. Ready for maturity yet unguarded, Mateo smiled, contemplating the journey ahead not just for Thomas but for himself. Little did either know. The discussion about the land had only just unveiled deeper currents that would challenge them, inside and outside their familial ties. With the stakes unpredictably high, Mateo realized they were about to unearth revelations that could drastically redefine who they were and what they valued. There was an authenticity burgeoning, and it beckoned curiosity that he could hardly resist. What awaited them next was not merely conversation, but a profound reckoning with choices they would both have to face. The weeks that followed shaped into a newfound routine for Mateo. The weight of the last conversation with Thomas still resonated within him, strumming an unsteady chord of hope and fear. From the outside, life on the land resumed its predictable cadence, tending to crops, repairing fences, and the quiet evenings that overshadowed each sunset. Yet within, Mateo found himself wrestling with more than just the seeds he planted. He began poring over old letters, mementos of his past, wrestling with that complex connection between legacy and personal aspirations. The memories flowed back as he read about his father's dreams, the relentless drive that had pushed the family to cultivate the land. Yet the vision was never just about the land itself. It was about the stories and dreams intertwined within each furrowed patch. Mateo recognized the duality of his existence, rooted in the past, yet yearning to grasp the future. Navigating his own emotions was becoming increasingly taxing. He knew he had to embrace this juncture, but how? The answer hovered before him, always just out of reach. A meeting of the townsfolk was approaching, and he visibly cringed at the thought of duty. This gathering was a relic of tradition, a gathering of shoulders fitted snugly in the old mold, where everyone expected him to fit perfectly in as well, but that wasn't what he wanted anymore. He pondered skipping the meeting, opting instead to join Thomas in creating a more profound appreciation for the future, a plan of sorts, a journey that could redefine what it meant to belong. The idea was thrilling and terrifying all at once. As evening fell, he found himself standing beneath the old oak tree, the one where he and Thomas had shared many conversations. In that space, Mateo felt a shift, an invitation to explore boundaries. He took out his notebook, the pages infused with sketches and musings, thoughts soaked in ink concerning aspirations laid dormant for years. What if he explored Thomas's world too? The question echoed in his mind like a challenge issued by an unseen force. Perhaps displaying courage in his own life could inspire his son beyond the limitations of their inherited legacy. Days turned into tension-filled nights. Mateo jotted down ideas, from developing local community resources to envisioning workshops that could serve as lanterns for lost souls like Thomas, a chance to rewrite their narrative. Each stroke of the pen felt like chiseling his identity anew. But could he truly step into the realm of personal ambition without the confines of expectation? Just as he was filling with a budding sense of purpose, the fears that had long laid shackled beneath the surface started rising again. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of alienating the community that had always defined him. Determined, Mateo made a decision. He would allow himself to taste this freedom, to fulfill the dreams that had waited quietly for nonchalance to give way to courage. When the night of the meeting arrived, Mateo made his way to the community hall, ready for whatever came next. Inside, the room was filled with familiar faces, gaunt with intention, eyes filled with the expectations of what should be and what had always been. Together, they outlined goals that bound rather than liberated, suffocating voices rather than encouraging growth. As he sat there, Mateo realized that he had a voice as well. His heart raced as he willed himself to speak up. The words tore through the fear, igniting a deep-seated bravery. "What if we consider new ways of thinking?" he proposed. The room hushed in surprise. "What if we allow our children to dream without the weight of our shadows?" Murmurs arose, challenging his audacity, questioning his loyalty. Yet the pressure felt invigorating, stirring the determination within. He had taken a step into a world he wasn't sure he could trust, but every pulse of his heart urged him forward. Mateo saw Thomas watching, wide-eyed, visible tension melting into admiration. The weight of uncertainty became lighter, signaling a shift not just for him, but for the lineage that had so long defined their paths. As the meeting concluded to an unresolved murmur, Mateo stepped outside, the crisp night air filling him with promise and dread. He had ventured forth into an exposure of dreams, yet the churning disquiet remained. Would this be a breakthrough or a barrier? As Mateo stood under the stars, he felt a profound gravity ebb and flow, urging him back towards the land, towards his son, and deeper into the heart of what it truly meant to write their stories anew. Would Thomas join him on this quest of newfound identity, or would he retreat into the safety of familiar shadows? The question loomed large, pregnant with potential, signaling that their journey was only just beginning. Mateo woke the next morning with a mixture of exhilaration and anxiety. The moonlit courage he had felt the previous night was fading, replaced by a nagging voice of doubt. He brewed coffee on the stove, attempting to cling to that fleeting spark of bravery, but each sip tasted bitter with uncertainty. What had he done? The meeting still echoed in his mind, his own words striking like hammers on glass. New ways of thinking. Had he unwittingly opened floodgates? As he leaned against the kitchen counter, he could feel the weight of every gaze that had turned toward him, the mix of disbelief and confusion. Would they see him as a traitor to the old ways? A seed of dissent sprouting where old traditions had taken root? Each creak of the wooden floorboard brought him back to reality. Outside, the sun was breaking over the horizon, casting golden rays on the land he had tended for so long. It seemed to beckon him as if understanding the turmoil within. With his coffee untouched, Mateo grabbed his notebook and went out to the fields. The sweet smell of earth after a recent rain filled his lungs, grounding him. He sat cross-legged among the rows of fresh crops, pencil poised over paper. He needed to outline what he had ignited to form a plan for how he could bring new life not just to the land, but to himself and his son. He scribbled ideas, visions flowing freely, community workshops, open discussions about possibilities beyond what they knew, an exploration of dreams that found their roots in uncertainty. He envisioned a space where generations could gather, unearthing the buried treasures of ambition. As the morning unfolded, Mateo recognized something pivotal. Each stroke of the pencil carved out pathways for growth. More than just an escape, he was defining his purpose. But deeper than the aspirations lay a profound fear that it might all come crashing down. What if the townsfolk rejected this new vision, shutting the door on progress before they even entered? The thought gripped him, squeezing hard. While grappling with his emotions, he remembered the way Thomas had looked at him last night, hopeful yet hesitant. Would his son understand this journey? Mateo wanted to illuminate paths, but he was afraid of leading him into darkness. Just then Thomas joined him, breaking through the early morning quiet. The boy's brow was furrowed, shadows lingering beneath his eyes. He had evidently spent a restless night himself. "Dad, about last night?" he started, his voice cautious, like the first steps of a child learning to walk. "Yeah?" Mateo turned, heart pounding. "I thought about what you said. It was brave. But it's scary too. What if they don't like it? What if they think we're trying to change everything?" Mateo felt the sting of his son's unease. There it was, his own worry reflected in Thomas's eyes. "You're right, son. It is scary." He paused, gathering his thoughts. But sometimes, change is the first step toward progress. We just need to find the right way to show them. They need to see that it's for us, for you. Thomas looked down at the ground, considering his father's words. Mateo felt the tension between them, a fragile thread woven with the hopes and fears of generations. "Can we really do this?" Thomas asked, eyes glistening with suppressed vulnerability. Mateo wanted to say yes without hesitation, but another wave of doubt crashed against him. Instead, he chose to reflect before speaking, anchoring his words in honesty. "I believe we can, but it won't be easy. We'll face challenges, that's for sure. But I felt a shift last night, a spark. Maybe it's time to see our dreams aren't as far away as we've thought." Taking a deep breath, Mateo looked into his son's eyes, encouraging him to grasp this moment of reckoning for both of them. Thomas's face softened, as though the weight pressing down had lightened. Just a fraction. In that shared gaze, something shifted between them, a silent pact of understanding. They would confront the fears together, and Mateo felt emboldened by the thought. Yet a question lingered in the air like an uninvited gust. What if the townsfolk refused to see what they saw? With resolve threading through his veins, Mateo knew they had to act quickly. A strategy began to form in his mind. How could they prepare? He scribbled furiously, planning an informal gathering of their own. Ideas flowed like water, yearning to carve out channels of new direction, but just as he filled the page, a figure loomed on the horizon. Mateo looked up, squinting against the sun. It was the local land committee head, a man whose very presence heralded tradition and caution. Anger pumped through his veins at the thought of confronting someone who had long upheld values he was beginning to question. Would they face the very embodiment of their concerns today? This wasn't just an offering of discussion. It felt more weighted with the past's expectations straining against the present's potential. The moment of truth hung heavy, resonating with the reality that Mateo was not just fighting for his own dreams. He stood taller, shaking off uncertainty. There was no turning back now. Would the land, the legacy, and the future align in this moment? Or were they simply beginning to unravel? Determined, Mateo turned to Thomas. "It's time to prepare to face what's ahead. We need to show them our vision. For us." Mateo walked towards the approaching figure, pulse racing with unease and purpose. How would he navigate this encounter, and would it be the spark that lit a revolution in their world or merely matchwood for the fires of defiance? Mateo squared his shoulders as he approached the figure, an unyielding presence emanating from the local land committee head. The man had always been a formidable opponent, embodying the time-worn traditions that were both a comfort and a cage. With every step, Mateo's heart thrummed louder, a strange mix of apprehension and determination coursing through him. "Mateo," the man greeted, his voice booming with authority that demanded respect. "I've heard some troubling news about last night's meeting." Mateo started to explain, to fervently articulate his vision, but the words fell against the man's hardened demeanor, slipping away. He realized and felt the sting of it that he needed to tread carefully. "I want to discuss the future," Mateo managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "Not just for me or my son, but for all of us." The man's expression was unreadable. "And what future would that be? One where we abandon everything that has kept our land flourishing all these years? Tradition is what binds us, Mateo." Tradition. The very word sent a shudder through Mateo's spine. It was the weight of chains he had long feared, but also a foundation he understood intimately. He took a moment to gather himself, pulling from the reservoir of hope he had begun to cultivate with Thomas. Tradition can guide us, but it should not blind us. There's a world beyond these fields that we need to consider. Our children, their aspirations. They deserve more than the confines of what has always been. It felt like a declaration, and even as he spoke, Mateo was buoyed by an unexpected surge of firmness. He was paving a path not just for himself or Thomas, but for those too afraid to challenge the familiar. The committee head folded his arms, a scowl twisting his features. "And you believe that your dreams, your ideas can stand against generations of our ways? Who will support you?" Mateo felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him again. Face to face with opposition, the cracked illusion of his earlier resolve began to dim. He hesitated, grappling with his internal landscape. Did he really have what it took to drive this vision forward? "I don't know yet," he admitted, surprised at how liberated he felt to voice his vulnerability. "But I cannot stay silent. If I do, I'm just as guilty as those who refuse to change." For the first time, Mateo caught a glimpse of surprise in the committee head's eyes, perhaps the tiniest flicker of reckoning. Mateo pressed on, determined. "I'm asking you to consider. We can bring people together, create workshops, open discussions, allow them to listen and share their hopes, their fears, challenge them to envision a future that includes everybody, where tradition and progress walk hand in hand." Silence loomed between them, heavy and charged. Mateo could almost see the wheels turning in the man's head. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about a collective murmur bubbling beneath the surface, voices yearning for expression. "What you're proposing," the committee head said slowly, "could easily turn into chaos. Or it could turn into possibility," Mateo countered, emboldened by the moment. "We can either be trapped in fear or allow ourselves the chance to explore." The committee head glanced away for a moment, weighing the tension in the air. In that instant, a realization struck Mateo. He wasn't merely confronting a steadfast opponent. He was wrestling with the legacy of a community rooted in fear. The challenge was not just to convince this man, but to forge ahead with unwavering authenticity. As if the decision had crystallized within him, the man finally met Mateo's gaze. "I'll consider your proposal. But know this, Mateo. Change is fearsome, and I expect challenges to arise. If you decide to pursue this path, you better be ready to face the consequences." His words landed like a weighty stone, and Mateo felt the impact of the response surge through him. Northward curiosity mingled with burgeoning resilience. He could inspire others, but would the effort fracture relationships? Would it amplify dissent? Mateo nodded solemnly. "I understand, but I refuse to let fear rule our choices." The committee head turned, walking back toward the horizon, leaving Mateo engulfed in swirling thoughts. Would they rally behind his vision, or would it fracture the community he had always known? Returned to Thomas, Mateo realized he had to prepare for the uncertainty ahead. The story was unfolding, yet countless chapters remained unwritten. Each person he chose to engage could either sharpen his message or potentially undermine it. As he walked back towards the fields where his son waited, he knew one thing: the time had come to face fear more fiercely than ever before. Mateo's heart raced with the reality that dreams could easily dissolve into smoke or ignite flames of hope. But he couldn't untangle the two without taking risks. A new plan began to bloom in his mind. How could he draw in others, entice them to see beyond their ingrained values? As he strove through the rows of crops towards Thomas, the vision of community workshops and gatherings took root in tandem with the widening uncertainty. What if fear wasn't the only option? What if a revolution of the mind could take place? Would his son stand by him, even as they faced an encroaching storm? With a flicker of determination igniting the air around him, Mateo whispered to himself, "Together, we can do this." But as they reached the meadow, a distant figure caught his eye. Someone who looked like a familiar face, a voice from beneath the weight of history. What could this encounter mean for the fragile path he had begun to tread? The figure drew closer and Mateo's thoughts raced. He could see the familiar features come into sharper focus. It was Marisol, the widow of his late neighbor, whose land lay alongside his. Her presence evoked a complex web of emotions, loss intertwined with shared memories of better times. "Mateo," she called softly, her voice laced with vulnerability. He was struck by the strength in her eyes, a fire tempered by sorrow. What brought her here? He paused, unsure whether to engage with her or mask his own intent. "Marisol," he replied, an edge of hesitation in his voice. "What brings you out to the fields today?" "I heard about your meeting with the committee head," she said, stepping closer. "I've been thinking a lot about what you're trying to do." Her words caught him off guard. "You have?" "Of course, I've seen the way things are, the way they've always been. It's not just tradition, it's a rut. And I worry for our children, too. They deserve opportunities. A choice." Mateo felt an unexpected warmth. Here was someone who understood his plight, who echoed his doubts without fear of pushing against the tide. But alongside the gratitude was a tightness in his chest. Could he still convince others to feel the same? "That's why I think it's time to find a voice," Mateo said, testing the waters. "I want to open up discussions. I believe we can make a real change if we can draw enough people to the table." Marisol's face lit up with intrigue. "What do you have in mind? How do you plan to reach out?" He glanced around, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Workshops, discussions about the future, a space for sharing ideas. I need to find a way to draw everyone in, especially those who feel unheard." Mateo's heart raced. Here stood a potential ally, yet fear of influence loomed behind every word. Was he ready to forge this bond, knowing that in collaboration lay both strength and risk? "Count me in," she said fiercely. "We've faced our share of challenges, and I believe many in this community are more open than we think. But we need a plan, something tangible." His mind raced with possibilities and anxieties. "What if we host a gathering at my farm?" It was a bold suggestion, one that could draw criticism but also support. Marisol nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, a safe space where people can voice their hopes and fears. You'll need to frame it in a way that invites participation rather than opposition." Mateo considered her point. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about refashioning the narrative that had confined his community. But what if, in his efforts to create this space, he exposed the very fractures that had remained hidden for so long? What if people reject this idea, he asked, a hint of insecurity slipping through. What if these discussions turned divisive? Marisol took a step closer, her intensity unwavering. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. Even if the conversations become uncomfortable, they need to happen. It's about growth. We both know how stifling silence can be." The fire igniting within him swelled. Here was his chance. Her endorsement sealed a new facet of their relationship. Mateo felt an urge to nurture this dynamic, understanding the mutual benefits of solidarity. Together, They could challenge long-held beliefs that felt like shackles. "Let's set a date," he said, steeling his voice. "We need to rally as many as we can. I'll speak to Thomas too. He deserves to see this path unfolding." Her smile was a lifeline. "And I'll speak to a few families I know. We can start small, build momentum." As they plotted the logistics, Mateo felt the confidence begin to take root in unexpected ways. The fear of judgment began to fade against the promise of collaboration. Each decision weighed against potential losses felt less daunting, yet undercurrents of concern still tugged at his mind. Memories of the committee head's scorn echoed in the recesses of his thoughts, a reminder that not everyone would welcome change. "Marisol, I need to ask something," he said, abruptly focused. "Do you think the committee will allow this?" Her expression hardened. "Mateo, with anything worth pursuing, there will always be resistance. But sometimes, it's in the resistance that we learn the most about ourselves and those around us." A soft breeze brushed against them, carrying whispers of possibility yet also unease. As they spoke, Mateo felt the weight of responsibility shift ever so slightly from his shoulders to theirs, intertwined as allies ready to confront the looming unknown. With plans coalescing, a shiver of excitement rushed through him, but dread clung like shadows in the corners of his mind. Could their combined voices light the way forward, or would it ignite further discord? Their journey had only just begun, but the risk of losing everything loomed large as he prepared to step into the fray. What more would it require to navigate around his fears and the deeply rooted skepticism that surrounded him? Would this fragile bond withstand the trials they were yet to face? Mateo sat on the edge of his porch, the evening sun spilling golden light across the fields, illuminating the patches of earth he had tended for years. Each moment spent in silence felt heavy with anticipation, the weight of the impending gathering pressing down on him. It was a strange irony. He had longed for connection, for a chance to be part of something greater than his own isolation, yet now he felt rooted to the spot with doubt. Marisol's words replayed in his mind, her fierce belief in the necessity of change echoing like a pulsing drum. What if she was right? What if this gathering could initiate a shift? As days passed, he busied himself with preparations, every detail a part of a delicate balance. He had mapped the seating, imagined the discussions, and rehearsed the messages he hoped to convey. But the deeper question loomed. Could he truly lead this charge? The night before their planned meeting arrived, and he found himself pacing. Doubts clawed at him, rising like steam from the ground after an unexpected rain. He thought of the committee head's dismissive gaze, the way it had felt like a wall between himself and the change he sought. Would they come? Would they listen? Determining to confront his fears, Mateo grabbed a paper and pen. He began writing down his thoughts in a way that felt raw yet cathartic, addressing not just the community, but himself. "People want change," he penned, "but they also fear it. How can I stand before them and expose my own fears when I wish to inspire courage?" As he wrote, he came to recognize that the act of articulation was itself validation. Through this exercise, he unearthed a crucial piece of himself, a burgeoning leader waiting for the right moment to break free from the shackles of self-doubt. He recalled how moments spent listening, connecting, and sharing had once invigorated his spirit. This time, however, he needed to bring that energy into his own practice. In the dim light, the pages before him began to show not just fear but also an undeniable clarity. Perhaps leading required vulnerability. Perhaps sharing his own uncertainties could create a landscape where others might feel safe to shed their apprehensions too. Realizing this, Mateo felt a flicker of hope illuminate his own pathway, mapping a way forward. The day of the gathering arrived, bringing with it a swirl of emotions. He and Marisol spent the morning setting up chairs and an array of snacks, each arrangement symbolic of their willingness to host an open dialogue. As people began to trickle in, Mateo's heart raced. He recognized familiar faces marked by skepticism and guardedness. Not everyone would embrace change, but everyone had a story worth uncovering. The first few minutes felt interminable, filled with restless chatter as Mateo fought to maintain focus amidst the rising tide of anxiety. Then, he caught Marisol's encouraging nod from the corner of his eye. Gathering his breath, he stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," he began, surprisingly steady. "I know change isn't easy, but here we are, together. And together, we can explore what that change could mean for us as individuals, as families, as a community." As voices emerged in retorts and questions, Mateo realized he was no longer just speaking to them, but engaging in mutual discovery. Each response painted a broader picture of their interconnected realities. Little by little, the atmosphere shifted from one of resistance to openness. Then came a voice, a familiar one from the fringes echoing the doubt Mateo harbored. It was Thomas, the committee head, skepticism slicing through the air. "What makes you think it will work? Change can be destructive." At that moment, everything around Mateo quieted, as if the world held its breath. The sense of vulnerability he had embraced now felt starkly exposed. What would he say? Mateo's mind raced, churning through the darkness inside. He could retreat into fear or push forward with conviction. He took a step closer, heart thundering. "I believe it's time for us to face those fears together. We can't allow the past to dictate our future. For too long we've let comfort control our choices. What if we could build something new, guided by the voices we've silenced?" With that, the air seemed to shift. The tension was palpable, laced with possibility. Would it be enough to sway them all? Would fear give way to courage? And would he find a sense of belonging among his peers? As the discussion unfolded, layers of resistance began to peel away, revealing the potential for something deeper, a connection born of shared vulnerability. Yet, as Mateo caught Marisol's gaze, he felt the echoes of doubt still nipping at his heels. Just as hope glimmered like a beacon, fear lurked in the shadows, ready to pounce. The conversation was unfolding, but Mateo sensed a deeper reckoning was at hand. What would it take to confront the voices that still lingered, rewriting narratives in the dark? And deep inside, a new question emerged. Was he ready to take on the most daunting confrontation of all, the one that waited on the horizon, where his aspirations met the shadows of doubt? Mateo stood at the threshold of his old oak porch, scanning the fields blanketed in sunlight. The gathering had concluded. Voices of concern and enthusiasm lingered in the air like a song, reverberating through his chest. Something had shifted, yet uncertainty clung to him like morning mist, weaving through the triumph of their first steps into dialogue. He had listened intently to Thomas, a young man at the helm of his own aspirations, expressing both fear and excitement. The contrast was stark. Where Mateo once felt shackled by expectation, Thomas was blossoming with an eagerness to forge a new identity. His son had taken part in the meeting, sharing ideas that flared like sparks, illuminating aspirations Mateo had abandoned. This realizational bond resonated deeply within him. They were venturing into unfamiliar territory, rewriting their legacy hand in hand. Days transformed into vibrant weeks. Conversations continued within the community, weaving a tapestry of open dialogue, each voice validated and heard. As Mateo participated, he felt solidarity forming among them, dismantling the ghosts of previous fears. The collective pursuit of growth was palpable, and here lay a recognition that often remained unspoken. Change was a thread in their shared fabric. However, new challenges emerged as well. Some members of the community, rooted deeply in tradition, began echoing concern. Why fix what isn't broken? Things have always been this way. Mateo grappled with their resistance, but he soon realized it was his turn to act, to pivot and redirect the conversation through shared understanding, allowing their apprehensions to lay bare. At one of their workshops, a dialogue session simmered with questions. Mateo openly acknowledged their fears and concerns. "I understand that change can feel threatening," he addressed the gathering. "But it doesn't mean we have to abandon our roots. We can adapt, evolve, and still honor what has come before us." His words, earnest and true, resonated with others in the gathering. The next crucial step was to incorporate tangible actions into their discussions. As summer set into full bloom, Mateo set a date for a community festival, an open invitation to celebrate both their heritage and newfound ambitions. It would be a day to weave their stories together through art, history displays, and shared narratives. That idea alone created waves of excitement, a holy cascade flowing through the village. But perhaps the most rewarding moments lay in the quiet evenings he spent with Thomas, discussing dreams late into the night. Who were they becoming? What did they want to create together? Each conversation molded a bridge between young diaspora and ancestral pride. His son recounting visions of modern life contrasted by Mateo, recalling tales of the past. Within the sanctuary of their home, Mateo recognized the potent fusion of hopes colliding with cherished histories, not clashing, but harmonizing into a melody of mutual respect. As the festival day drew nearer, Mateo's confidence solidified. He found himself leading meetings with the community, shaping discussions and drawing lines between aspiration and necessity, tradition and innovation. Whispers of discontent lingered. However, where once he crumbled, he now composed himself. Those who once echoed doubt were beginning to listen, and in that moment of focused clarity, Mateo's spirit burned bright with purpose. Then came the festival. Bright banners decorating the fields, laughter ringing out from joyous families, and displays showcasing stories of their ancestors. It was a vivid testament to the blending of past and present. Smiling faces of neighbors and friends welcomed everyone, each person contributing pieces of themselves to the day's cherished narrative. At its core, this event held more than just celebration. It became the embodiment of hope, transformation, and acknowledgement. As the sun began to set, he caught sight of Thomas moving through the crowd, holding conversations with old friends and engaging with families that he used to shy away from. Matthew's heart swelled with pride. The son he had feared would stray was now becoming a beacon of light. In that moment, something beautiful shifted within him. Mateo realized that every fear he had once clung to was not a barrier, but rather a step in his journey. Growth required letting go of the past, of expectations set in stone. He had not lost what it meant to be Apache, nor had he persuaded Thomas to abandon the teachings of heritage. Instead, their union had blossomed into a future filled with respect, awareness, and love. The festival closed with a community bonfire, crackling and radiating warmth as they came together under the stars. Mateo gazed into the flames, reflecting on the dual growth that sparked from their unwavering courage. Together, Mateo had emerged as a leader, embracing his past while nurturing aspirations for the future alongside his son, now also a pivotal figure in this new journey. Every fiber of his being now vibrant with gratitude and understanding, Mateo felt at last the winds of change wrap around him. He stepped forward as a participant in a greater narrative, a man who had embraced transformation, rekindled connections, and woven a path of fulfillment that assured him and Thomas they could honor their heritage while forging their destinies together. He pledged to carry that spark forever, to observe, to listen, to learn, and to grow, assuring every effort reflected acceptance of all they could become. As laughter and warmth filled the air, he drew in the love of his community, feeling connected to a rich history while ready to navigate uncharted waters with Thomas. Now more than ever, with clarity breaking dawn on his journey, Mateo embraced authenticity. Both the daunting and the exhilarating were now gently interwoven into his tapestry of existence. He had awakened to his identity, and in that moment he saw the fullness of his life unspool before him, a life of continual reclamation. This was no longer just his story. They had collectively made it their own. Now with paths intertwined, it was time to support what lay ahead. Every change carved a deeper meaning into their lives, and the symphony of their future became the thrill of each new adventure awaiting them. And so, the final words of the festival's speech, true to their essence, reverberated. Together we will create a legacy not bound by history alone but passionate with the spirit of growth and unity. To all the viewers immersed in this powerful journey, it's your moment to seize this transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for these remarkable narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this unforgettable conclusion. Share instantly this video, with at least 5 friends who need to witness this touching resolution. You need to take action now and let your voice echo in the light of stories that inspire profound change.